Thank you to the Taubman School and the University of Michigan for inviting me to kick off this first set of voices about digital publics. I had a very bumpy plane ride in a very small jet, so I'm actually quite glad to be on the ground and to be back here and see so many friends here. Digital publics, like physical publics, are constructed by a set of engagements, flows, conversations, communication loops and traverses, cross-cutting conversations among material things, people, and environments. The most interesting of these conversations from our perspective at KVA MadX are those cross-cutting traverses where material objects talk to people, weather systems or ecologies or environments talk back to materials, materials talk to other materials, and yes, people talk with other people sometimes from radically diverse walks of life, or at least these people are connected briefly in encounters in ways that they wouldn't normally otherwise have had. What I'd like to do is talk about 6 projects very briefly and offer an account of our recent work at KVA MadX, and also try to open up a conversation that might speculate about the future of digital publics. There we go. I thought I would begin with material culture, plywood, since we've seen a lot of plywood. Also, yesterday in Chicago, some fantastic plywood projects from the University of Michigan here. In a way, the material culture of softwood or plywood is a first instance of a second nature. It's mediated by a generation of industrial production technologies. This is the quarter saw, which was perfected in 1911, which literally unwinds a log, stripping it. This is not quite as innocent a technology as it might seem. This had to do with the kind of reorganization of entire forests and landscapes, going from the kind of vertical condition of birch to vast fields of logs that are organized in arrangements of capital and economies. And this is maybe the first instance also of a developed surface in architecture, the way in which these rotary saws literally unwrapped the solid tree trunk into very, very thin layers, multiplying the volume very dramatically. And it's interesting that at this very time, there was a repositioning, an interesting repositioning, which I think we're seeing now, between wood and suddenly the qualifier real wood. So plywood is in fact a real lumber, it's a real wood, so it seems necessary to kind of qualify this feature about it. And of course, plywood is the instrumental expediter, that sheet good that provided all the lateral stability for the hollow wall for the balloon frame. The floor, all of those wood studs were joined, of course, by sheets of plywood, creating that cavity space whereby all the centralized building services were placed. That condition of wall and that condition of thinking about building services we have inherited from modernism, and it's still part of the mainstream today. So plywood, if you read the small print, it says the most modern of materials. This is an advertisement trying to situate the new material, the new second nature construction material, in relationship to an advanced technology of the time, the television. So we have to ask ourselves, what then happens? What is the trajectory as we begin to think about the maturization of digital technologies? I think 3 factors come into play. The fact that the technologies are very small, that sometimes they're materially flexible, and that they're efficient, so they're cool, thermally cool, and they can be embedded in materials. And these materials then participate in this history of wood that I've outlined. With data, the moment that we find ourselves in now is a kind of processing sensing moment, a moment where we've shifted from on-off electrical energy to actually thinking about information and how we process it. This is a project that we did at the University of Pennsylvania where we worked with a motion capture technology. We did a lab and we tried to appropriate that technology of movement and use it to bring a public life to the corridor. So this is a project that involves taking the software processing, taking video feeds in the corridor, transferring that to a simple black-white background, and then taking the a form and translating it back into a series of dots. So if the technology of the motion capture puts reflective dots on the human body and then takes many picture points of those and then reconstructs them on the computer, we did, in a way, the inverse of that. This is extremely simple. We used a series of positive, negative data points that are organized from loose to dense, and we literally had the contractors staple these on blueprints on the wall. Go through that just very quickly and give you a sense of what that's like. That project is called the Companion, a virtual companion. You can see that happening there. Go ahead. Now, I'm going to draw a little bit from a meta-argument by the historians Lewis Mumford and Langdon Winter. And basically, that argument says that there are really two essential approaches to technology. The first is a flexible technology that has some choice about its particular dimensions or arrangements. The other is a technology, and the primary choice is whether one should implement the technology or not. It offers very little choice in its actual material arrangements, and it tends, the argument goes, to predict certain patterns of human behavior. And so this is likened to the ship at sea, for example, that requires a captain, the factory, which requires a certain kind of discipline of laborers in relationship to machines over time. This is a project that we did in Korea, a competition project that we did recently for Yaesu silo. This is a water top with water being cleaned here from a public resource, which is the ocean. So we took the buoy system, which is owned by a consortium, Oceanographic Consortium in Korea and Japan, and proposed that the water currents and water quality be monitored, connecting the ecology of the ocean to the ecology of the building envelope, and giving a view of the ocean, a different kind of view of what is actually inside the ocean, to the city of Yaesu. This is University of Michigan's own Charles Garcia, demonstrating people. People beginning to be consumer producers, taking transformable objects, malleable objects, in this case the flat bag, demonstrating the various different things that can be done with them. This video is pure Charles, but in the end, it's a lantern that can be illuminated, and it's the flexible light and power project. So the move from the typical user to the consumer producer that Desserteau talks about, to the idea of the constituent, I think is the next trajectory of people. And of course, we see this too in the developing world, where we have, for example, environmental educator who can take a kit of technology, very simple technology, with a USB out, and begin to form agent networks for conservation practices, for healthcare practices, and also for harvesting energy. In terms of space, we can talk about the trajectory from the closed or traditional plan with bearing walls to the open plan, to the notion of reconfigurable spaces. This is the Convia building system that we designed with Applied Minds, which uses a communication network to communicate and connect any actuator, anything that has a motor, whether that's a light, an HVAC, an LED, and to group those very rapidly and also to disassociate them so that large spaces can be reconfigured. So instead of thinking about an electricity room or a media room in a university, you can amortize the space a little bit better. Soft House is also another example of this, where we tried to take a very, very simple technology, the curtain, and ask it to do another task, ask it to harvest energy, and have a low voltage 12-volt ring with various different devices that run on low voltage, from computers, laptops, to solid-state lighting, batteries, and so forth. So this brings the idea of how much effort goes into making change in a configuration, to what degree the technology offers choice, and the kinds of spaces that it makes. This is the next scale-up iteration of the soft house for the International Bauausstellung in Hamburg. And here what we tried to do is create a kind of a dialogue, or a conversation, if you like, between exterior weather and the conditions of Hamburg and the building exterior. This is a responsive facade that we're doing with Jan Nipper's Advanced Structural Engineering that takes a very lightweight thin film and gives it an extra axis just by bending it. You can see just how this works. This will just run. This is a visual breeze. The curtains are responding to the amount of wind. It's a kind of a windy place because it's by the port, Hamburg. So what we tried to do then is develop a way of visualizing energy and a very fine grading of using light. And this is the very first prototype of the building management system that we're developing for the soft row houses in Hamburg. Again, using processing, you can download it to your laptop. You can evaluate the amount of energy that you have. That energy is used locally for the purpose of powering lighting that can be moved back deep into the row house. This is a view of that with the curtains that move horizontally, carrying light back. Finally, just a thought about practice and the idea that again, that there might be two traditions of technologies, one more or less authoritarian, the other perhaps more democratic, and that these exist side by side in the West. And that these technologies might be relatively flexible in their design and arrangements. And with a flexible technology, one can open up room for choice. The idea that's on the table for discussion is that certain kinds of technology, because of their complexity and because of their insistence on organizational systems that require very high concentrations of capital, a very kind of a elite trained class to operate them, do not allow such flexibility, and that to choose them is to choose a form of political life. So we see again a trajectory maybe from the craftsperson to the architect to the material strategist. And we recognize, in these two accounts of technology, the physical organization of technology and also the organizational arrangements that a technology can take. We recognize both of these characteristics, of course, in architecture. A ship is not that different from a building site, let's put it that way. So we're in a both-and condition. If the architect focuses only on an organizational strategy as a material strategist, he or she risks accelerating the kind of amnesia that we have in America about manufacturing. To put it simply, here in Detroit, we've almost forgotten how to make things. But on the other hand, if the architect favors only the direct work with material and focuses only on making, without anticipating how to engage that work with existing large-scale socioeconomic systems, then that architect will only be able to produce work at a very small scale, limiting her or his larger impact. We should, I think, embrace this conundrum. This is the conundrum that we find ourselves in, as the kind of 6 degrees of flexibility offered by the SOFT project. Thank you.